time I was 3 or 4 years old, I drew all the time. Do all the time, every second. When I worked in my father's florist, he was from the old country, and he was a Greek immigrant along with my mother. But when I worked at a store, as a good Greek son always did, I drew all the time, and when I was in the store and I wasn't actually working, I was drawing. Yeah, I was at the High School of Music and Art. I call it the greatest school of learning since Alexander sat at the feet of Aristotle. But I took design courses along with history of art courses, along with academic courses, and I had a flair for it, whatever that means. But at the very beginning of the design courses, they were basically kind of a retro, Kandinsky's and Herbert Matters and Paul Clay's, and we did designs with circles, and then we did a design with circles and triangles, and then with circles, triangles, squares, etc., rectangles. And at the end of my very first term, after doing that for a term, along with all my other courses, Mr. Patterson gave us a beautiful 18 by 24 sheet of Strathmore, expensive sheet of Strathmore. Must have cost at least $1 in those days, which was big bucks. And he said, what we're going to do in the next hour and a half will be one half of your mark for the term. We had done dozens and dozens of them. And he said, and the subject this time is rectangles, period. And everybody started to work. And I just sat there for an hour and a half, and I didn't move. Just kind of looked around the room. And he was furious. You could see him walking around and trying to, everybody busy as hell, cutting out squares and, and doing a shape here, doing Maleviches, Malevich, red shaped, blue shape. And I didn't move. And an hour and a half later, he said, "Time's up," and he started to pick up his. He was furious. He was turning red, and he came up to me, and he went to grab my 18 by 24 sheet, and I said, "Hold it a minute, Mr. Patterson," and I wrote my name, my signature in the corner, and I handed him a 18 by 24 rectangle, and he still didn't get it. He was furious, and he tore it out, and I said, "Oh my God, he didn't get it. Oh boy." And I came in the next morning, and there were 2 or 3 teachers in the hallway who stopped me, and they said, "George, what you did for Mr. Patterson's class was brilliant." So he obviously had gone into the locker room or something, and as they were leaving school, and he said, "What's wrong with that George Lois here? He's a terrific student." And he said, he was doing an 18 by 20. Yeah, and he did nothing. He just handed me an 18 by 24 rectangle. Anyway, that was kind of I've always said that was kind of my epiphany, my self-induced epiphany when I realized that, and I made public to everybody at the High School of Music and Art that any problem, any design problem, any communications problem, there's a chance to do something unusual, exciting, dramatic, unique, and my whole career is based on the fact that everything I work on, what I have to create, whether it's a advertisement or a music video, a magazine cover, a promotion piece, my answer's got to be totally surprising and unique and thrilling. So somehow in that first year at High School of Music and Art, I knew I was going to be some kind of a communicator, a designer, and also I was really inspired greatly by the work of Paul Rand, who at that time That was 45, and I was 14 years old, and he must have been like 26 or something. He was a Wunderking, and he was writing and creating his own advertising for people, for clients like Allbacks, and he was doing IBM logos, etc. And it was thrilling to look at his work. Not that my work is anything near what his is, but I was thrilled with the idea that that you could work in as a communicator, as a designer, as an advertising guy, and create your own work and not be a whore, not do awful, terrible work. So that inspired. Well, I started in advertising. After the High School of Music and Art, that was basically my graphic arts training, as far as I'm concerned. It was it was 4 incredible years. I then went to Pratt Institute, and I met my future wife that first day of school, and I was nuts about her. And I realized after a week of Pratt that they weren't anywhere near as good as the High School of Music and Art. But I stuck it out because I wasn't about to leave her. And I went through the first year, and then the second year, I didn't quite know what to do, because I know the school was so awful, but I went to my first classes at the second year, and I ran into another great mentor, a teacher by the name of Herschel Levitt, and he looked at he saw what I did for him, and he said, George, why are you in school? And I said, I'm trying to make a living, and he said, get out of here, you're not going to learn any more here. And he gave me a piece of paper with a woman's name who had a woman art director, which was very unique back then, who had an art studio, and she sent me to him and I went there the next morning, and I left school in before my second year started. And she did promotion and advertising, etc. It was a great first job because she was a superb designer, etc. What happened was I lost my exemption in the Army. It was during the Korean War, and I got drafted and wound up going to Korea. Came back alive, and she wanted me to be a partner with her, but I didn't want to, and she said, what do you want to do? I really want to work at CBS television, because it was a really dynamic time in corporate imagery and corporate design, with the great Bill Golden at the head of it. They had just done the CBSI, etc. So I went at CBS, and it was an incredible atelier of design and advertising, but somehow it wasn't big time advertising. We worked on products, etc. And from there, so I left there, and Bill Golden said to me in 53 or whatever it was, 54. George, you can't go out there. It's a world. The world is terrible. They're all Philistines. They're all hacks. And he was right. He said, you're not going to be happy there. They're not going to appreciate your talent. And I said, well, but somehow something drove me to do it. And I went, and I had the job I went to was pretty awful. And I had a lot of stories that seemingly apocryphal, but actually true, when I kind of acted up in my first agency and overturned the desk, etc. Did some kind of crazy stuff. But after that, I went and I worked with some of the great other great pioneers in advertising and advertising design. Herb Lou Ballin, and I worked. Then I went to Doyle Dane Bernbach. I worked with for Bill Bernbach and Bob Gage, and again I did something insane. I left Doyle Dane Bernbach. I went to Bill Bernbach, and I told him I was leaving to start the second creative agency in the world, because Bill Bernbach had started the only creative agency in the world. The reason he started it was based on the fact that he had worked with Paul Rand early in his career, and somehow he understood that if you worked with a good, terrific graphic designer especially one who was prolific and could write like Paul Rand, that you could do better advertising if you worked, if the art director could conceive advertising with the writer. Because up to that time, basically all advertising was the art director sat in his room with his thumb up his ass and waited for the creative director, for the copywriter to come in, throw him a piece of paper and say, make a layout, lay this out. And the layouts were, these typical awful, unambitious layouts. So I left Doyle Day and Bernbach. When I left Doyle Day and Bernbach, Bill Bernbach said to me, George, you don't know what's out there. And he literally said that Doyle Day and Bernbach was basically a creative freak, that somehow they were a miraculous a group of people that somehow together could forge a great advertising, and it couldn't happen again, not in this Philistine world. But I started an agency called Paprika and Lois with two writers actually, and we were successful almost immediately. And then after 1 or 2, 3 years, coming out of my agency with two other agencies, Carl Alley and a guy named Cape Sloves, and then another guy left my agency and went into business with Mary Wells and started Wells, Rich Green, and before you knew it, by the mid 60s, I realized that I had triggered, with starting that second creative agency, I had triggered something called the creative revolution in advertising, and it became the golden age of advertising. I mean, the 60s and the 70s basically was the golden age of advertising in advertising. This madmen, think I hate their show, which is true. When I first started the show, before it premiered, I get a call from one of the producers, and he said, we're shooting, we're doing little spots with the people who were the original madmen, he said, of the period. And, we're shooting, and they named 4, 5, or 6 people. I never heard of a couple of them. And whoever we talked to mentions your name. I said, time out. You're doing a show on the advertising in the 60s, you never heard my name. He said, oh, no, we've heard your name. I said, bullshit, you never heard my name. Okay. I said, if you want to know what happened in the 60s, if you want a real understanding of what happened in the 60s, I did a book in 1972 called George, Be Careful, which is basically, my story about, growing up in New York, and growing up in the New York School of Design. I became one of the Wonder Kings of the New York School of Design, and how I started, the second creative agency in the world, and how that became the creative. But it's all about the 60s, etc. And I called it George, Be Careful, because when I was a kid, I remember the hand of God coming into my bedroom. It was Michelangelo's hand. It said, George, be careful. And my mother told me, George, all my life, my mother told me, George, be careful. My father, my sisters, my coaches in sports, when I went into the Army, they told me to be careful. And then when you go into advertising, that's when everybody tells you to be careful, Anything unusual, anything over the top, anything edgy, you can't do that. So George, Be Careful was my anti-slogan. And if you wanted to know anything about the advertising in the 60s and the advertising world of the 60s, read that book, Goodbye. I was saying, fuck you, and I closed it. And he called me back a couple of days later. Somehow, I told him to go get the book at Amazon because it was out of. He called me up a couple of days later and he said, "Oh Jesus, wow, we could have done a show on that." I said, "No shit," because that was the '60s. Anybody who knows anything about the media world, anything knows anything about it, when you mention the '60s and you mention advertising in the '60s, they don't think now they think of the madmen of that dumb show. Before that, they thought of it as a heroic age of really of the age that I was talking to you about breaking, leaving Doyle Dane, Bernbach, and Bernbach was a giant part of it, obviously. And then with another 3 or 4 agencies after that kind of came out of my agency, that was the most heroic age in media communications since the 12 apostles. Well, to oversimplify, the big idea is a concept that takes the unique virtues of a product and sieving it into people's minds, that somehow forces a extraordinary sales increase in whatever you're talking about. But and I always talk about the big idea. I'm kind of called Mr. Big Idea. But what I'm really talking about is true creativity, and I say creativity, can solve almost any problem. The creative act, the defeat of habit by originality can overcome everything. But at the same time that I talk about the creative act, I really tell people who are trying to do creative work that creativity isn't really a creative act; it's an act of discovery. And they look at you like, huh? And I did a book called George Lois on his creation of the big idea. Where I show 100 things I did on the right-hand page, and on the left-hand page before it, I show something in my DNA, something in my understanding of 7,000 years of art, something in my understanding of movies, of ballet, of sports, of humor, of dirty jokes, whatever it is, something in there that inspired what I did. And I tell young people especially, that background of high art and pop art, that intellectual background of understanding the world around you, and especially the 7,000 years of art is essential to doing creative work. Once you have that understanding, and that ethos of trying to understand everything. When you have any kind of a problem, if you then look at the problem and look at the competitor and et cetera, and look at and get your basic information, once you really understand the problem, the answer is there. It's like floating by, and all you got to do is grab it. It really isn't an act of creativity; it's an act of discovery. I sound very mystical talking about it, but that's absolutely what creativity is to me. If I learn all that there is to learn about something, and I know I'm ready to come up with an answer, it's there. And it's not a bolt of lightning. What it is, it's coming out of your own sensibilities and own understanding of the world. The method is to be interested in everything, and the organic part of it is the passion for everything around you, the passion for I mean, when I teach a class, at School of Visual Arts as a favor to somebody, and I'll say to a class of 25 kids, have any of you been to the Metropolitan Museum of Art this year? Okay. Have any of you been to MoMA this year? One hand. Have any of you never been to the Museum of Mountain Art? 5 people, 8 people. I'm astounded. I'm just truly astounded. Talking to design students and people who are supposed to be communicators. So that total And that's why when people say today, well, how when's the second? Is the second creative revolution going to come? I said no. I said, I mean, you got the internet, and you got Google, you got all the information at your fingertips, and nobody, they don't know shit. Nobody knows shit, you know. One of the classic books in advertising, one of the great books in advertising, The Confessions of an Ad Man, by David Ogilvy. Every word in there is the wrong, absolutely wrong, every wrong. When I was working at Doyle Day and Byrne back in 1959, I got conned by his copy chief into coming to see Ogilvy, and I said, well, you're talking to the wrong guy. I mean, he begged me to come, and I went. And Ogilvy's trying to hire me as their head art director. You know, I think at one point I said I'd be the head art director if I could become the creative chief. He was the creative chief. You know, if I was the creative chief, I could do great advertising here. You know, and I told him, Mr. Ogilvy, I don't know why you're trying to hire me, because I don't understand one word. I don't agree with one word in your book. I mean, he had the rules of this, and the logo's got to be here. And he's got rules. There are no rules in advertising. It's impossible. You know, I mean, the only rule in advertising is that there are no rules. You know, the best. What I'm saying to you now. Look at the newsstand. You know, I mean, it's a cacophony of famous people, or people who want to be famous, with blurbs all around it, and it's supposed to be, and that's supposed to be creativity in journalism. My God, it's unbelievable. It's shocking. I mean, how can 200 magazines, do the same cover? That's always there. And advertising, go home and watch advertising. You watch commercials on TV, and I'm not kidding. I don't really understand what the hell. I mean, half of them I don't understand what they're talking about. And most people don't understand, even if they see something that they kind of enjoy, they don't remember the name of the product. So I mean, I think I don't see any. I mean, these people who keep talking about we're on the advent of coming up with the creative revolution. I don't see it. I don't. At the same time, I know there's got to be talent out there. I'm not sure who's telling them what to do. You have to have an understanding. You have to have an understanding that everything. I go back to what I said before. Everything you do, you have to have a solid problem. If you come up with an idea, a big idea. If you show it to somebody, your wife, your friend, or a client, they should go, holy shit! Your head should go back a foot. It should be such a surprising idea. The only chance you have to do anything that's memorable is it has to be a shock when you first see it. And what people do is they just so the work is so unambitious. I mean, television commercials are little films. Something's going on, and you don't quite know what's going on, and you say, well, what is it about? And then you're looking for who the client is, and then when you see it, you say, oh, I don't get it. So I find it's a wasteland of creativity, unfortunately, and I can't believe there isn't talent out there, because I have fans who profess, a love of my work, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's got to be something they got to learn from it. And what they got to be learning from it is that when you do something, it should be a knockout idea, And in most cases, certainly in editorial, and which I only did for 10 years for Esquire, and now in the Museum of Modern Art. But you have to, when every cover is, when it was on a newsstand, some people went, I mean, the culture went apeshit on some of them. They looked at it and went, whoa. Go to a newsstand today. there's not a memorable. Forget about something being being a culture buster. There's nothing there that you could possibly remember. There's an ad today about a Hearst ad today about 3 magazines. They talk about they're getting awards, et cetera, and you look at the covers and I don't know, they're nothing. You know, they're all the same cover. You know. Oh no, that's the big problem. You know, I mean, I'm talking about people, about young designers not being ambitious enough, et cetera, et cetera. One of the problems is that you know, certainly in magazine design, there's a lot of terrific talent doing editorial. I mean, when you get this, Society of Publication Designers sends me their awards every year, a book, you know, and you look through it, and there's a lot of terrific spreads in it, and a lot of exciting stuff going on. You know, there's talent there, and then they show the best covers of the year, and they're nothing, you know. Everything. It was the editor. You know, Carol Hayes came to me. He had just basically taken over the editorship of the magazine, even though he had been responsible for the last 5 or 6 or 7 issues. And he had been reading in 1962 about my ad agency, and the reason it struck him is because it was an art director. It was the first ad agency, Pat McCain Lois, where there was an art director in the masthead, and the stories were all about my advertising. You know, every month there was a big story in the New York Times, at least, about campaigns I had done. So he was looking at an avid art director's exciting work, and something made him call me to get advice on how to do covers. I had never done a cover in my life. And when he called me, and when I saw him, I didn't know. I thought he was trying to get advertising for my ad agency, and I was being nice to talk to him because I had been reading the magazine. I knew it was a terrific magazine. And he basically said, I need advice. And I said, well, how do you do them now? How do you do your covers now? He said, well, you know, 4 or 5 of us editors sit down with 3 or 4 people on the design part, and we have a long discussion about, and we try to come up with the what topic in the issue coming up should be the subject of a cover. I said, yeah. And then he said, and then we all go away. We come back 2 or 3 days later. We each of us have 1 or 2 ideas on what the cover should be, and maybe there's 5 or 6 of them that we don't quite know. So we pick them out, we comp them up, and I said, oh my God, group fucking grope. And he said, huh? I said, group grope. I said, is that the way you work with the mailer and Talise and you know, he said, no, of course not. I said, well, obviously you don't have anybody there who knows how to, somebody young who comes to you and says, hey, Howard, why don't we do this? So, you know, go out. Now, basically, I was saying, get a freelancer. So he said, well, how do you? I said, well, you know, you get somebody who understands the culture, who's a kind of ahead of the culture, who's literate, who understands, who loves politics, who loves the, you know, who loves the opera and loves the theater music, and you know, and he can tell a dirty joke, and he knows somebody who understands the culture. And I started to give him a couple of names that mate with people who might be able to do it, and he said, and he was Southern liberal, kind of an oxymoron. And he said, hey, pal, can you do me just one favor? I don't know what the hell you're talking about. Can you do me one cover? And he said, okay, I'll do you one cover. I said, when's the next issue due? When's the next cover due? And he said, next Tuesday, but let me give you time. I said, no, I'll do it for next Tuesday. What's in the issue? And I don't have it here. I said, describe it. Tell me, just a sentence for each story. So he told me this. And one of the things he mentioned was there was a spread with a photo and a short piece on Floyd Patterson, who was a champion of the world, and Sonny Liston, who was the challenger, and Floyd was, in the upcoming fight, was a big favorite, big 5-1 favorite, too fast for Liston, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, well, so the issue is going to come out, the issue will come out a week before the fight. I said, okay. And I went away and I did a cover. I got a guy who looked like Patterson, 6 foot, not too muscly, and I showed him, and I called a fight. I basically said everybody was wrong about it. He's not going to win the fight. He's going to get destroyed by Liston. And I showed Patterson laying flat, in the middle of the ring, left for dead. Nobody in the arena. His handlers are gone. The press is gone. 20,000 people are gone. It was a metaphor not only for sports, for boxing. If you lose, you're dead. But a metaphor for any walk of life. When you lose, they leave you for dead. Anyway, and the cover came, and when he called me up and he said, "Oh my God, I never saw a cover like this in my life." And I said, "Yeah, that's right." He said, "But you're calling the fight?" No shit. You're crazy. Suppose you're wrong. I said, 50-50 chance I'm right. And if I'm right, you're a genius. And if I'm wrong, hey, you played the game. But I said I'm right. I really told him I am absolutely right. And anyway, I found out many years later, it ran because he said he would quit if the publisher turned it down. Which, in fact, when the issue came out, the publisher, Arnold Gingrich, wrote a editorial saying, "You see that cover? See our cover? We have nothing to do with it." It's absolutely true. Anyway, when the cover came out, when the issue came out, it was a laughing stock of the sports world, and they were holding up. They're a little ridiculous, 5 or 6 days later, Liston destroyed them, and they were geniuses. They had the biggest newsstand sales in their history. And I found out later there were guys, the editors I met only a couple of years ago, that said when the cover came out, they thought it was the end of Esquire because they almost didn't expect a paycheck anyway. They were so deeply in the red. The magazine was in. I found out later that they were really in trouble, financially. And what happened from the time I started doing the covers for almost 10 years is the circulation went from 500,000 to 2 million, and with cover after cover, some incredibly controversial, but anti-war the only mass magazine in America that dared speak out against the Vietnam War. In fact, we were the leading people in media in America against the Vietnam War, and in the support of Muhammad Ali, who was a hated fighter at the time after he became a Muslim and refused to fight in that terrible war. So and it only all happened because of Hayes, because people say, boy, it took some balls to do those covers, Lois. It didn't take balls to do the covers. It took him balls to run it, And in fact, I'd call him up and I'd say, I was sending a cover to him, and I always chose my own topic for what he showed me. Sometimes he talked about what was coming up in a magazine, and I knew the topic that he was basically excited about was the one I had to do because it was that important. But many times I picked, like that cover I did, I told you about for the first issue with Lister. It was just the spread that they put in at the last minute, But I'd call him up and I'd say, cover's about to get to you, Harold, and I said, this one's going to really get us in trouble. And he'd say, yeah. And when I meant trouble, I meant he would lose. Not only would he get bombed by senators and congressmen and God knows who, and people writing in, death threats sometimes, but losing advertising clients. Because Esquire had many clients down south. They did a lot of menswear, and a lot of the mills were down south, and there was a time of the Jim Crow South. I mean, it was a time of real racism going on in America. There's always racism in America, but that was when it was rabid and rampant. No, it's changed. Oh, for worse, because somehow, growing up with the internet and growing up with stuff on the screen and filling the page with information. Look at most magazines today. Look at even the great magazines today. And like a Vanity Fair, it's just jammed with, and New York, it's just jammed with information and copy, etc. It's almost like, it's an extension of the TV, of what people were used to. I mean, when you talk about white space, which used to be a big thing in school, in graphic art school, where you talked about, hey, they should have white space. But they knew what they were talking about. They were talking about, gee, sometimes there's an idea that so exciting that you need the expanse. You need the great pioneers in editorial design in the 20s and 30s was a guy by the name of Dr. Aga and Alexei Brodovich for Vogue magazine, and the Irving Penns and the Avedons and all graphic designers learned somehow from that kind of experience of a spread that had some kind of vitality to it, and when you look at the internet, there's a load of information, but there's no design vitality, and there's no attempt for design vitality. I mean, even most people's websites, where you have a chance to do something, to express something. It's not so much, I'm not down on the iPad or whatever they do, but I'm for the magazine. I'm for the visceral excitement of a magazine. I mean, to this day, when I get magazines, and they don't have to even be a great magazine. You turn a page, and when you lay it on your knees, it's like a lap dance. I mean, it's a visceral thing, and I can't see, I mean, if I was really a young man today, to say, well, what would you be doing? The website would you do? I'd say I'd create a magazine. I'd create a magazine and have people say, "Holy shit! Did you see that cover?" Then nobody, "Wow! You see that thing? Nothing like it. It's a revolution in journalism." A graphic designer, who understands ideas and understands that ideas are what that makes the world go round, could change the world with a magazine. If just one talent could do it right now, and everybody would stop saying it's the death of magazines. I'm trying. Now, it's funny because people said, well, have you ever, I saw you weren't a movie director or this or that, and I say, what I've able to work on in being a graphic designer and being in advertising, etc., was I've done hundreds, thousands of commercials. Music video, best music video ever done to this day. Joker Man. Kurt Loder still says it's the best music video ever. I've done sales films that would knock you down. They were so exciting. I design logos. I design packages. I design ad agency. I design space. I mean, every part of. I could be a Renaissance man in a sense, doing all of those things. And including the concept for New York Magazine, actually the first design for the first logo for New York Magazine, I did as a supplement for the Herald Tribune in 1962 or 3. And in fact, Harold Hayes was at my office one day. I think it was 63, might have been 62. And he saw me working on a magazine, and he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I do the advertising for the New York Herald Tribune," and he knew that because I was doing a very exciting campaign. Who says the newspaper has to be dull? In fact, I was producing a commercial for the Tribune every night. I would get the front page and write a script and a shooting script in a cab and produce a commercial every night that would go on every night. In any case, it was a big success. And I said, well, I'm selling the hell out of the newspaper, a daily paper. I can't. The Sunday paper can't do anything with it because you can't compete with the Times of this stick. So I'm doing a supplement. I'm trying to get them to understand that they can do a supplement called New York. And if you did it right, you do it beautifully designed, get terrific writing, et cetera, et cetera. And it could be a combination of the New Yorker and Q magazine, telling you about specific things to do. And if you did that, you could sell another 200, 300,000, 400,000 copies just because of that terrific supplement. And Harold's looking at it. This was only. I was only doing covers for half a year or so, and he said, "George, if I left Esquire right now and you left your agency, we should do this magazine, and we should do magazines because it's a city magazine," he said, "and we could do a city magazine for 7 or 8 magazines across the country." And I remember for a second saying, "Holy shit. That's a real big idea. That's big think." But of course he didn't do it because I had an ad agency and he was doing it. But when you say why didn't I do it now? I said, well, it's not that I'm old and tired. Because actually, I supposedly retired in the year 2000. My wife says I'm not tired. I'm not retired. I'm just tired, but I'm not, because I work all the time. I work with my son Luke, and we do stuff all the time. We're doing advertising. We're working on a script and shooting script for a TV special, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But you never could tell. I might do a magazine. I would have to work with an editor who basically treated me the way Harold did, and that treated me as a big talent. He should treat me at least as good as he treated Gay Talese. And that's what he did with me. He said, I deal with the Taleses and the Mailers and this and the Loises, and they do their thing. That doesn't mean he didn't edit those guys, which he absolutely did, because even a great writer needs editing, but he didn't edit or change one thing on anything I ever did. I mean, when I did something, it was like, holy shit, wow, I love it, or oh, wow, am I going to be in trouble, and of course he loved the whole concept of being in trouble, because being in trouble meant that people that he knew that a magazine had to be dynamic and had to have ideas, and he also understood something that people no one at the works understands today, and that is you don't create a magazine for your readers. You don't take a poll, like the politicians do, and find out what they're thinking and what they want. What do you mean what do you mean what they want? You're supposed to be above and beyond, the culture. You're supposed to be leading the culture. You're supposed to be ahead of the culture. You're supposed to be telling people what the hell you think is exciting and dynamic and thought-provoking, and do it your way. And that's the way you can create a great magazine. And then if you do it that way with all that kind of passion and talent, you'll get an audience. We got our audience. And basically, at Esquire in the 60s, the audience basically, I never found out what the real numbers were, but I think a half of the circulation, I'm making it up, was college students. I run into people all the time to this day who were in their 20s when I was doing covers in the 60s, and now they're 60 years old, and they know every cover. They can tell you how covers changed their lives. People tell me where they were when they saw the Ali cover at St. Sebastian. They can tell me where they were when they saw the cover. That's the kind of and Harold called them pictorial zolas. What's funny is I said pictorial zolas to somebody a couple of months ago when they said, "What's a pictorial zola?" Duh. When I explained J3Eaw, they still didn't get it. But in any case, and I call myself a cultural provocateur, and I call myself a cultural provocateur in my advertising too, because when you create advertising, it's not just to sell a product or a person or an idea. It should go beyond that. It should touch sometimes very dynamically on the culture. And there's no way, you can't do great advertising unless you understand that you shouldn't just be selling the product. You should be talking about encompassing the culture or where the culture should be headed. I talk to that about. I tell students that, young people in advertising that, they don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. They don't get it until I show them examples. So when you say what excites me most in advertising was when I took something and made it a giant part of the culture, and that was the most thrilling, of the things I worked on, and I've done a couple of dozen like that. The Esquire covers. What I was most excited about was, was the anti-war stuff. Stuff that helped wake up America, and woke up people to the greatness of Muhammad Ali. Because when I did that cover of Muhammad Ali, St. Sebastian, he was. I mean, if there was a poll on it, that 80% of the country, white and black, were against him, and that cover in and of itself helped change America's attitude about the war, and directly helped change Martin Luther King from saying to all the Southern, all the black leaders, that he would keep out of talking against the Vietnam War because he didn't want to piss off Johnson, because Johnson was a real pioneer in helping forge civil rights laws, but. The second he came out against defending Muhammad Ali and against the war, he was in deep shit with Johnson. So I mean, I think I'm proud of a lot of things I've done that helped change the culture. I mean, that's the stuff that you really remember. I mean, I say that I would do a magazine, but I probably would start an ad agency and show everybody how it's done. There was an article I just read the other day. What's funny is you read 30 magazines, you can't remember where you read it. In the old days, if you read something Esquire, one of my covers, you remember where you saw it. But that's beside the point. There was an article that the head of the third largest agency in the world, Publicis, I guess, Maurice Levy. And he goes, questions and answers, it goes on and on and on. All he talks about is technology. I mean, there's not one fucking word talking about his ad agency that mentions creativity. It's got nothing to do, the product's got nothing to do with what they do, what they're about. It's shocking, That's the way it used to be with all the ad agencies. I remember there were agencies like Ogilvy made it after David Ogilvy died, and they talked about him, and the reason they sold themselves on the fact that they were a scientific agency in the sense that they did this great research, and I tell everybody, advertising isn't a science, it's an art. I mean, science. Most advertising, most people to this day, most people who judge advertising in the world, certainly in America, they've all gone to marketing schools and communication schools, and they've been taught that advertising and marketing is a science. Because how do you teach it's an art? What would these schools say for advertising and marketing is an art? How do you teach that? So to this day, the way you show clients, most clients, it's something and something really edgy, and they'll look at it and they'll say, very interesting. They'll hand it to somebody who's sitting next to them, to esteemed VP, and say, very interesting. Research it and find out if I like it. There's no. People don't talk about the creativity of something. It's astounding in all walks of life. Starting with the head of one of these giant ad agencies. But I was talking about Ogilvy made it, and I remember the woman was the head of the agency, and she went on and on and on and on and on about the way they research, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's about time. Not one mention of creativity. And people like Will Bernbach, when he did Dog Day and Bernbach, or people like me with Papa King and Lois, and Mary Wells at Wellsvich Green, that's all we talked about was creativity. What the fuck else is there to talk about? That's the name of the game. It's the product. It's when you talk to a guy who to Mullally at the Ford, he talks about the car, about the product.